At a time in America when religious identity kept Jews, Catholics, and Protestants apart, these 4 chaplains of different faiths gave away their life jackets, linked arms, and went down together praying with the soldiers who could not leave their ship. David Fox is founder and director of the Immortal Chaplains Foundation, and he has interviewed the surviving veterans of the Dorchester.
The story of the Immortal 4 Chaplains begins with, of course, the 4 men themselves, and they were unique in that they were all of different faiths and came together on this boat, a U.S. troop ship called the Dorchester. And they were Clark Poling, who was a Dutch Reformed minister from upstate New York. And then there was Rabbi Alexander Good, who was rabbi out of Washington, D.C. My uncle, who was George Fox, he was a Methodist minister up in Vermont. He actually had 3 parishes at one time. He was called a circuit rider even then. And last was the Catholic priest, Father Washington, from New Jersey. And they met on the Dorchester at the end of January 1943, and I interviewed the first sergeant of the ship, who was on deck at the time when the 4 of them met. So that was interesting, because I actually got to experience what it was like to know what they were like when they got together, and he explained that they were immediate friends. They just sort of hit it off together, and they started laughing and joking, and they had a bond almost immediately between the 4 of them. On board, the chaplains began to organize entertainment for the men. And the men would tell me in the interviews I did that they were always together, and that was remarkable for them.
Was that their job?
Yes, it was their job to provide stimulation for the men, things for them to focus on other than knowing that there was a submarine out there. And they soon found out that they were, in fact, being trailed by submarines. So the chaplains kept their spirits up. They organized a talent night, and apparently the chaplains were the biggest hit themselves. They were quite talented singers. I think all 4 of them were. And Rabbi Good, Alexander Good, was also the son-in-law of another rabbi, Rabbi Yolson, who was the father of Al Jolson.
Really?
Yeah. So he had considerable connections to show business. So they became very, very popular on the ship.
Rabbi Good, he could sing with the best. He would hold his services as the others hold theirs, and we all went to all of them. We were on a ship. We had nothing that we could do. And so when they had services, we went.
Lots of times they were together. They were going around and trying to keep morale up. And they all worked well together. They seemed to fit right in. But they just felt closer to Father Washington. He just seemed right at home, even in the atmosphere of a troop ship.
There was a couple of fellows playing cards, and Father Washington came wandering through shortly after I got in there. I was watching the game. He came over and he stood behind a fellow, and this fellow turned around to him. He said, "Father, would you bless my hand?" He looked at it and he said, "I should waste my blessing on a lousy pair of trays?" I thought that was just like him.
The captain had just said that there was at least five submarines trailing us. They picked them up on radar, and they said if they hit you, that's when they told us, if they hit you, you have to worry, 2 minutes you'll be dead.
So I start making my rounds. I went upstairs. I thought it'd be better to tell the men, take off our boots, put on our shoes. Boots are too heavy. Shoes are easy to remove. I walked that ship continuously talking to men.
So it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, I guess, and there was one One escort ship was a Coast Guard cut ahead of us and 2 on each side, and the 2 freighters, and we were in the middle. And it only do about 9, 12 knots top speed. And the Dorchester was losing speed, you know, with the heavy seas. And we dropped back out of the convoy. And there we were set right in the open. And when we were in the open, that's when they hit us.
And I was sitting in a stateroom right off the starboard side I was on. And we're sitting there playing cards, and I went to snap the cards down, and instead of saying, "Gotcha," I raised the card like that. Everything went black. I said, "What the hell was that?" I said, "We're hit."
The Dorchester was 90 miles off the coast of Greenland, where the water temperature of the Atlantic in winter is roughly 36 degrees. A storm the night before had frozen many of the lifeboats to the railing. Life jackets, each with a small red locator light, offered the best, though still slim, chance for survival.
I just come off guard duty. I took my jacket off, and the next thing you know, boom, and before you know it, the ship was rocking, and who had time to even think about a life jacket at that time?
Again, David Fox, nephew of Chaplain George Fox.
The chaplains organized the men. They would hand out these life jackets, put them on, and then they would lead them to a place where they could jump off and not be hurt. The chaplains, without any hesitation, just simply took off their own jackets and placed them on the next man who was waiting there.
Lights went out and steam pipes broke and screaming and a very, very strong odor of burnt powder, gunpowder. I had to talk to myself to fight off the panic, which I heard was going on. I crawled out on deck, and I looked around. There wasn't a soul on the ship. Not a soul. It's always best to get as many people to abandon a ship with you. Hold on or tie on with anything, so there'll be a group of lights. The Coast Guard sees a group of lights, that's where they're going first. But this way it looked like a city out there with lights. It looked like a large city. And the ship now, by now, is floundering. And I looked down toward the stern, toward the back of the ship. I see a bunch of heads moving. I was so happy that I got somebody to go man the ship with. I must have lit up like a 100-watt light bulb. I went down there. Good Lord. There's 10 men. Not a word is said. Not a word. All the men and the chaplains opened up a prayer, and I see that they were not going overboard. They were not going to abandon ship. They were going to hold our last service. I began to say my prayers, and shed tears. I couldn't abandon the ship there. I went back to the port side, 2 feet to jump. As I jumped, the ship broke. A huge wave pulled me away from the ship. A little wave hit me, and I got a mouth full of oil. It was choking me, and I heard a voice, "Pull him up." There was a lifeboat there full of men.